Hey guys. Alright, so I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys how I polish my boots. I've already stripped them down. These are my second pair of range boots that I use at the range because they're waterproof. I stripped them down and I taped one of them just to show you guys the process that some people like to do, and they tape it up. I like to do the whole toe now. Well, not the whole toe, but just where it's nice and blended, so not a hard line. But I'm gonna show you the tape method and then do the other one as well. Some of this video is gonna go by pretty quick, but I'm gonna show you the basic concept, and then I'm gonna fast forward through some of the other parts that you're gonna see in terms of polishing. We'll get a few layers on here, and we'll show how that mirror finish starts to get on there. But just to show you guys right from the get-go, you can see here how there's really not much shine quite yet. This is just stripped. This is just the basic leather on there, and I'm gonna show you what I use. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and do Lincoln wax on this boot with the tape, and then I'm gonna use parade gloss on this boot. Kind of show you the differences. There's not a whole lot of difference. It's really just comes down to personal preference. But you can get the same kind of overall look with both polishes. So it just really depends on what you like. I have a little bit of water. I put it in a spray bottle so I can spray it. A horsehair brush, and then when we get to that point, cotton balls, and then also a heat gun. Now a little bit about the heat gun itself. I bought this heat gun on Amazon for I think it was like 10, 12 bucks or something like that. I like it. It's a craft heat gun. It has a small little nozzle to heat up the boot a little bit more accurate versus like an industrial heat gun from like Home Depot or Harbor Freight or something. This one's a little bit better in my opinion because you can control how much heat, and it doesn't just blast a ton of heat onto the boot. It lets you kind of melt it as you go. All right. Now just to kind of give you a basic outline of how it's going to work, what I like to do is, I have a cotton t-shirt that I just ripped up. And basically I apply the polish. I heat the outside of that polish very briefly with the heat gun, just around, and then I hit it with the horsehair brush for the first few layers. Get that base layer built on there nice and thick. And then we do it again, have a couple more layers of that. And then once we start putting the polish on there again, I heat up the wax or the polish, melt it down a little bit more, and then start buffing it out with the cotton ball on the water. And that's gonna really give it that nice mirror gloss finish. So let's go ahead and get started. I'll show you this process first, and then I'll fast forward to kind of show you as well and how I keep going. All right, so this is a fairly new can. I used a little bit last night for my boots, which I will show later on how those look. But basically what I do is just get quite a bit of polish on there. You can see how it's got on there real thick. I just lather the polish onto the boot itself. I like to swirl it on. I feel like it ingrains into that leather a little bit more. Now when you're polishing, you don't necessarily want to polish on the cracks. If you wore your boots a little bit in, you'll see where the toe naturally bends. That's when the polish itself starts to crack on there. Now this method is a way of doing it. It's not the way of polishing. Some people have their own methods. I've shown a few people and they've kind of done their own thing and kind of made it their own process. It comes down to technique. The more time you put on there, the better the outcome. The more you buff, the more you get a shine. The ultimate goal, in my opinion, comes down to how much mirrored finish you want to go for. And the less you see the texture of the boot, like the leather, the better the polish itself, or better that mirror finish. And that's ultimately the goal that we're trying to strive for. So you can see here, the polish is built on there nice and thick. You can see how it has like a kind of a matte finish. It's not really shiny quite yet. But what I do, this is the first base layer. So what I do is just kind of crisp those edges. Let's see if I can show you in the video. Not very much right away because this is just the first layer. Just enough. Alright. That's good enough. Now, what happens with this is that with the heat itself, I feel like it kind of melts the polish into the boot a little bit. So what it does really is just kind of hardens it up. So when you wipe it, it doesn't really come off on your finger or on the cotton ball or anything like that. But what I do from here, you can see how it's kind of dull still. All right. And then when you hit it with the horsehair brush, there's something about the horsehair brush and leather that actually naturally adds a shine to it. But once you hit it like this, you don't have to be light with it. You can be somewhat hard. You just want to make sure that you hit it with the bristles out. And that was stripped. The boot was stripped. And literally this is one layer. So you can already kind of tell that difference in how it has a nice little shine to it. I know it's the video, so it's a little harder to see, but you can tell that there's polish on there. Once it's kind of melted in there, it's staying on the boot itself. It's not gonna crack as easy. If you do bump it against something and scuff it, yeah, that's a big deal. Of course, you wanna try to avoid that. But the horsehair brush, what I like about it as well is that it kind of gets rid of the texture of the polish itself. So when you put it on real thick, you'll see that there's kind of like that finger marks or swirl marks or whatever. The horsehair brush kind of helps break those little mountains, if you will, down, and it gets it nice and smooth, ready for the next layer. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is fast forward the video a little bit, and I'm gonna put about two more layers at least on there, and we'll see what it kind of looks like, and then go from there. Okay. So I already forgot how many layers I put on here. I think I put on 2 or 3 more. I have to double check the footage and see how many layers, but I just keep putting on until I start to kind of see that there's a difference between that base layer and the leather itself. And already we can kind of start seeing a difference. If I can see it, I'm looking at my phone to see what the video looks like as well. But there's a difference between the polish and the leather itself. And the polish has some, brush marks on there from the horsehair brush. That's not a big deal quite yet because we are going to fix that later on. Again, the horsehair brush kind of helps break down the polish. It kind of smoothens it out without rubbing it off. Keeps the boot nice and smooth, but also starts to give it that shine on there. If you rub your horsehair brush on the rest of the boot, you'll naturally start to shine the leather on it, which is pretty cool. But it does kind of help. After being in class all day with a nice shiny boot, at the end of the day when I come home and polish every night, I hit it with the horsehair brush and scuff up the entire boot, and then add my layers for polishing and buffing it right after. It kind of helps get the dust off there and keeps it nice and clean. That's what helps the polish kind of adhere to each other as well. So I'm going to show the process again. Now this time, to be honest, I don't think the base layer is kind of built up fully quite yet, but we're just going to go ahead and polish and see what we get. Now this is just kind of a sped up process, so you guys can see with the process, the more time you take to put into this boot, the better you're going to have. You're going to have more success with the actual shine and get it to that mirror finish as well. All right. We wanted to be able to actually see a reflection off the boot itself and not just shininess, but we want to see an actual reflection. And don't mind my little puppies right here. They have to stay close by because they need me. All right, so again, it's on here real thick, but I'm kind of smoothing it out with my finger. Turn it this way so you guys can see a little bit better. Really just kind of smoothing that polish on there. Again, it's real, the polish itself is real moist on here when it's first getting on. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So you can see my finger's clean. If I rub polish off, you can see that the polish itself is coming off. Now, when you heat it up, it's not supposed to come off after it's heated up and cooled off. So in the process, so that was the initial base layer. When you're heating it up for the actual buffing mirror finish layer, what I do is I melt it down to where it gets super wet looking, like it's almost water on top of your boot, like it's super wet and shiny and mirrored. But when you pull the heat away, it turns into like a matte finish, like it's like cloudy. But you don't want to keep the heat on there when it's getting that wet finish, because what will happen is the existing polish that's on here will start to drip down kind of like water, and that's what we don't want in there as well. Okay, so I'll show you what I mean by that. So if you can see it in the video, see how I can still see the texture, but I want to wet it just a little, heat it up a little bit more until it gets real wet and moist looking. And then I pull the heat away and move to a different spot. Nice and even all around the entire boot. It kind of makes you feel like the polish is done. Like you're, oh wow, I got that mirror finish, but it's not. So I got it to where it was nice and wet looking. You can still see how it's kind of turning into that wet look to it. Blowing it till it's kind of cool it off. When it starts to dry, it'll take a couple seconds, but you see how basically the matte finish, or the polish kind of turns like a matte finish. That's because it's basically ready to be buffed out now. Now here's where the cotton ball and the water comes into place. So now if I rub the cotton ball on the boot, you'll see that there's polish coming off, and that's because the texture from the cotton ball is going to rub the polish off. That's where some people have a mistake and they're like, oh well, the polish is coming off, and the point of the polish is to stay on there. So that's where the water comes into play. It's kind of like a lubricant, if you will, to basically smoothen out and buff out the actual cloudiness of the polish, so that way you can get that shine on there. So I just sprayed on there. This is the clean side, and if you notice now, no polish is coming off, and the boot is already starting to get shiny. So one of you guys once told me, the more you sit here and just watch TV and just buff out, the shinier it will get, and I promise that. So now you can push down a little hard if you want on here. You can start to see that the actual polish itself is getting kind of smoothened out. It's getting kind of rounded off, where you can stop seeing the texture of the boot so much, and there's no polish coming off, but you're really adding that shine to it, and you're really kind of just buffing it out, which is nice. All right. Now I didn't put enough base layer on here, which is why I can still see a lot of texture, but we're gonna add a few more rounds of polish in here just so you can kind of see that process. But the ultimate process of what I just did in terms of the base layer, hitting with the horsehair brush, and then coming back with more polish, heating it up, melting it down, and then wetting it, and then hitting it with the cotton ball, is the same process regardless. It's the entire process. That's exactly what I'm doing. I'm just adding more and more. Now, some people want a number, like how many layers of polish do I put? It honestly depends on how thick you put the polish on there and how much your boot is already done. Once you get a good solid base foundation on here, you could add more and more polish every night, and that's kind of what I do. Every once in a blue moon, I'll strip them down and start to all over again, just because I want a fresh look. And it could take a couple hours, but it just depends on how much time and effort you want to put into it. But you can see here how it already starting to have that mirror finish. You can just see kind of like the glossiness. You can see my ceiling lights kind of reflect on here a little bit more. You can actually see some reflection coming onto the boot, and that's just what, 4 layers of polish, 4 or 5 layers. You can see the difference between the polish portion and the leather portion. Now, some people think this would be good enough. I don't think so. I think it needs a lot more. So again, I'm gonna go ahead and speed up the camera. I'm gonna add a few more rounds of polish on here and see if I can get this layer to get real thick so you guys can see that full mirror finish as well. All right. So put a couple more layers on there. We'll see what it looks like now.
I'll make sure all you guys are covered.
Sorry for the background noise, I'm watching TV.
Alright, see you guys.
Alright. Now, when you're buffing it, and again, if there's wax coming, polish coming off on to the cotton ball, a couple things, you probably didn't wet enough or you didn't heat it enough. So, wetting it up now. Heating it up just a little bit more. Yeah, and again, I would probably be safe to put on a few more layers as a base layer just so I can get that real good finish on there. But for sake of the video, we're gonna go and deal with it like this. Cotton ball, just have at it. I hit it nice and lightly first with the cotton ball, the first round, just so I know that I heated it right and I wet the boot enough. When I know there's no polish on there, I could add a little bit more water. Then I could put some actual pressure down. Now, the pressure, if you're putting it a little harder on the boot itself on the cotton ball, it kind of helps create that friction, kind of warms it up a little bit, and allows you to kind of smoothen the polish out a little bit. So it gives you that kind of smooth finish, but also that nice glossy finish too. And gets you that extra mirror shine. So I'm starting to get there. Now again, I've taught a few people my method, and they've had success with it. And again, they've kind of done their own thing, kind of turned it into their own method, and it's worked for them, and they've had good success with it. And of course, this video gets shared to anybody working in law enforcement now or military, whatever. You always want to check with your policy and kind of see if you're allowed to do certain things or whatnot, but for the most part, this is pretty standard. If you want to have it nice mirrored finished, this is a pretty decent method. It takes some time, but the more you do it, the quicker it can get. To be honest, I've only been doing this for half hour. Usually I'll spend 2 or 3 hours doing from a full strip to get the polish right and get the boot real nice. And it's worth it to me to put that extra time in, because then it'll look good, and it also lasts a little bit longer too, which is nice. So you can see it's looking real nice. It has that nice mirrored finish on there already. You can start seeing my reflection. Let me see if you can see the actual camera on there. Yeah, you can start seeing the TV in the background. You can really see that mirrored finish. And this is just a few layers. Again, when I'm done with this, it's gonna look even better than that, because there's just a couple more layers and more buffing. You'll be good to go. So you can see how the cotton ball looks, it's kind of molded to my fingers. That's because after I initially get that nice little clouded finish gone and it starts to shine, that's when I start creating a little bit more friction, put a little bit more effort into it, press down just a little bit harder, kind of warms up the polish, allows you to kind of smoothen it out, and then kind of gives you that extra shine on there too. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and pause this video. I'll be back in a few minutes. What I'm gonna do is add a few more layers on here and get this real to my standard personally. And then I think what I'm gonna do is just go ahead and start with the Lincoln on the other boot and just kind of show you that process, and then I'll show you how I finish up with the Lincoln on there as well, just to kind of show you how it looks like, and then taking the tape off as well. All right. All right, guys, I'm back. So I did 2 more layers on there, real thick layers, and with the right kind of melting of the polish and buffing, I got it to have a real thick, nice real mirror shine finish. So let me see if I can get it close to the camera. You can see the reflection of the camera real well. You can see the red light beep, reflection of the ceiling. It's actually pretty good on here. So I would say that this is finished. This is gonna pass inspection. It's gonna look pretty good. That one's done. Now, again, it didn't take me very long. I'd say maybe 45 minutes, an hour. If I put extra time into it, I could really get it to look even better than that, which that looks pretty damn good. That's with Parade Gloss, all right? But I'm gonna go ahead and show you Lincoln with the other boot. Same process, except this one has the tape on there. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is go ahead and start it, quickly do the first layer with the base layer, and then I'm gonna fast forward the rest of the video so you guys can kind of see from start to finish how it is, sped up, and you can kind of go from there. All right, so let's get started. So, I don't know how many layers that was, but it didn't take very long. I think maybe 10-15 minutes total to get it to this point. But I'm gonna go ahead and take the tape off so you guys can see kind of that process. Now, some people like the hard line. I kind of like a blended line, not exactly a hard line, but you can see the big difference between the polish itself and the leather. You can see how there's an actual thick layer on top of that, so it looks like its own little layer of polish, and you can see the hard line on there. It works, it does the job, but I mean, we're almost at a mirror finish right now. Just want to buff it a little bit more, and you really start to get that shine going. So it's already pretty good, but you really can add more to it and get it to look perfect. But you can see here how the Lincoln wax pretty much is the same as the Parade Gloss. It really just kind of comes down to preference. When I went to the store, all they had was the big Parade Gloss. I like the way the Parade Gloss kind of goes on. It goes on a little bit more smooth and not so clumpy as Lincoln or the regular polish. But again, it's the same thing, same outcome. Just kind of depends on your personal preference. So you can sit here for a long time and really kind of just buff them out, and you'll still get that same mirror finish even with just a few layers. I do this every night before class, so the next day my boots are ready to go. I don't have to worry about them. But just to kind of show you side by side, big difference, and that's just about an hour's worth of work on both boots, and it looked pretty damn good. So a couple things on top of that. Again, if you use a regular heat gun, like a heat gun that like this, not a craft heat gun, you just got to be careful with how much you're actually applying the heat on there, because you can actually burn the leather and you can actually melt the polish away. So when you're putting the heat on, you want to back it off and kind of let it melt down, but also back it up to the point where it's not going to just overly burn the polish away or burn the actual leather itself. Again, these are just range boots. They're not anything specific, just to kind of show you what that looks like. If you leave it on there for too long, what's going to happen is it'll start to melt down and kind of droop down if it's real thick. If it's not real thick, it'll actually start burning away, and you'll see the actual leather start to show through. So you see here, I don't know if you can see it, but the polish itself is starting to drip down in the corner. You see how basically I don't know if you can see it in the camera, but basically the leather's starting to show through, and that's because the polish kind of dripped down to the side right there. So again, it really depends on your personal preference as far as the heat gun, but I like this one because I have more control over it, and it's light and it's cheap. It's 10 bucks, 12 bucks. You get it on Amazon. That's pretty much the process. If you guys have questions, just let me know and I'll help you out any way I can. But this should give you a good start and let you kind of figure out your own technique and kind of go from there. So good luck, y'all. Take care.